I told you yesterday that if it really is the economy stupid, then Donald Trump may not be in as good a position as he thinks he is heading into 2020. At least that's my opinion, but obviously not his, as the president pushes for tariffs on Mexico.
This will take effect next week, and what 5%.
In a UK press conference yesterday, Trump called the tariffs a matter of national security, said they could go as high as 25% if the Mexican government failed to prevent migrants from illegally crossing into the U.S. But while the president was making his case from London, his closest allies in Congress, Senate Republicans, were looking for ways to block it.
There is not much support in my conference for tariffs, that's for sure.
Even Trump's outgoing White House advisor had to admit it could be bad for the U.S. economy.
You know, if we got to 25% tariffs, there would be, cost to that for sure.
And as this debate plays out among Republicans, at least one top Democrat is taking advantage of the infighting.
I want to be out there every day fighting for what I believe in, and that's the working people of America. Fighting for poor people, fighting for working people, fighting for middle-class people, fighting for everyone who wasn't born into wealth and privilege.
Senator Elizabeth Warren put out a new economic patriotism, as she calls it, yesterday, promising an aggressive intervention on behalf of American workers, many of whom made up Trump's base in 2016. And then former Vice President Joe Biden may be seeing an opening as well, speaking out on the importance of cooperation with the very Republicans now at odds with Trump.
There's people who say that you can't work with the other side. Well, if that's the case, prepare your children for a totally different U.S., totally different world. I don't believe it. The Republicans are my opponents. They're not my enemy.
Joining me now to discuss are Charlie Chieppo. Charlie's a senior fellow at the Pioneer Institute and former policy director for Governor Romney. Good to see you. Dan Primack is business editor at Axios, in the news a little bit lately. Dan, good to see you. So are the growing number of Republicans who used to believe in free trade right now when they're saying this thing is bad for the economy?
It is bad for the economy. There's no doubt about that. And particularly, we're talking about this 5% tariff maybe going into effect on the 10th. But as you say, the idea in theory is it would ratchet up by 5% every month, going on to 25%. It's a huge problem. It's a tax on the consumer. It's also for companies. This isn't just like the China one where you were talking about finished goods coming into the United States with 5% extra on them. A lot of companies build, particularly automakers, they build part of it here, then they send it to Mexico, they build part back and forth. That's a 5% tax every single time it crosses the border.
So Jared Kushner, who did a very good job of convincing your coworker, Jonathan Swan, the other day, doesn't know anything about anything, was actually right on this one. Is that correct?
If he said the tariffs were bad, and even Peter Navarro today started walking it back a little bit.
Trump's trade guy.
Trump had originally said this is if illegal immigration stops. Trump's trade guy kind of today said, well, so long as we got their attention, then maybe we don't need to do it.
Before I moved to Charlie, today, I don't know if it was on the radio or before, someone was asking me, so do you think Mexico will meet Trump's demands by the deadline? And as I'm about to answer, I said to myself, what are his demands?
Right. No one knows.
What exactly is Trump looking for, except them, quote, ending illegal immigration? What is he looking for from the Mexican government?
We don't know. People have asked the White House. The White House doesn't have answers. Again, right, the only metrics we have on this are tariffs, a 5% number. In terms of number of immigrants coming over, we have nothing.
Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, what he's looking for is to sort of goose his base in the polls. I mean, that's.
But what does he need from Mexico? Some throwaway so he can say?
Yeah, exactly what he always does. He just pulls something out of the air that's not real and says, oh, well, yeah, it worked. We did it. Fine. I'm going to go on to whatever else, catches my attention.
So can we talk about these loyalists, these at least general loyalists of the president, including one here who, as you'll recall, candidate Trump suggested his father may have killed JFK, but they have gotten along incredibly well since. Here's Ted Cruz from Texas to reporters yesterday on these tariffs. Here's Senator Cruz.
This is like a giant game of chicken. It's like two trucks on a country road headed straight at each other. One or the other is going to blink. This is the wrong solution to the crisis.
Am I being naive or hyperbolic to say this may be the beginning of some sort of resistance amongst the Republicans? Because it's not just Cruz, by the way. We saw McConnell, who obviously is running the Senate. Is it the beginning of some kind of resistance?
Well, I wish I could agree with you, but I don't think it is. I think as long as Trump's numbers among Republicans are as good as they are, my sense is that there might be these occasional one-off issues where the Republicans in Congress might oppose him. But I think in the larger picture, they're going to be with us still.
But when you say one-off, it generally is one-off if they happen at all. But this comes at almost the exact same time that a significant chunk of Senate Republicans are saying we're not crazy about sending weapons to the UAE and Saudi Arabia. And while you might argue that on the tariffs it's purely self-serving, I have no problem with self-serving. It's not self-serving to say we shouldn't be selling arms to the Saudis and people like that. So one off, two off, it builds something over time, or does it not?
I think the arms issue is probably less in the public eye, and more people are unaware of that. So I'm not sure it really comes across that way to the average person.
Do you think there is a resistance? I mean,
here's the reason I don't think so. So there is some, but take the tariff issue, right? The tariffs, the idea of putting tariffs on Mexico, particularly for something that's not trade related, that's immigration related, is completely against all Republican orthodoxy, right? It is a non-Republican position. So the fact
so is praising foreign dictators.
There is, but so the fact, though, on this, that there is any Republican support at all, and there seems to be a lot. It's unclear, just because McConnell says there's not support in the caucus, it's unclear if there's veto-proof non-support. The fact there's any at all suggests that there's a big portion of that Republican group in the Senate who's still with Trump.
Maybe when you were mentioning a minute ago, Charlie, that as long as Trump's poll numbers stay solid, I assume you're talking about intra-Republican numbers where he's 90%.
Right.
But some interesting numbers came out from CNN that I have to say I was shocked by. Voters, this is in the last couple of days, the end of May, voters who think Trump will win re-election versus December, it's up 11%. From 43 to 54%. And by the way, that 54% is higher than where Barack Obama stood at 50% at the same time in his first term. Is this, as I said, is this all about the economy? I tried to dispel the notion that the tax cuts met any of the promises Trump made. But putting that aside for a moment, is this 11-point rise since December in people's belief that he'll be reelected? By the way, most of that rise comes from people who do not think he's doing a good job.
I think as much
is that about the economy?
Partially the economy. It might also be watching 24 Democrats who've all gotten into the race since then, and people looking saying, wait a minute, that doesn't look terribly organized.
Right.
Is that your take, too?
Yeah, I agree with that, yes.
Well, could it also be, maybe this is another moment of optimism, that there be a real debate in this country? I mentioned this economic patriotism proposal from Elizabeth Warren. Are any Democrats making headway on the economic front, or is it just owned as of the moment by Donald Trump?
Yeah, no, I mean, I just don't think it's realistic when you have 24 candidates and you're this far out from the first people actually going to vote, that to think that there's going to be a lot of, I think let's look.
But she's the policymaker. I mean, she does stand out on this issue.
But in terms of,
I don't mean just the economy, on virtually everything.
No, that's right, because she is clearly running the most, the most substantive campaign. But I think you got to at least wait until we start having debates and people start paying attention even a little bit before that's really going to winnow out and we're really going to know who's making progress.
Without going into colossal depth into this thing, it's $2 trillion of investment in climate-friendly industries over a decade. Does it make sense to the Dan Primacks of the world?
I mean, look, there's a lot of headlines in it. It's not incredibly detailed. Yes, none of these things ever would be during a campaign. That's not a knock on her campaign. It may. It's kind of, to be honest, it's an acceleration of some of what was done by the Obama administration after when they came in after the financial crisis, which gets a lot of slam for the Solyndra piece, but most of those deals actually worked. This is basically hypercharging that.
You mentioned the debates. We haven't even had the first debates. Are now, 3 weeks away? Miami, 26th, 27th. Yeah. 10 Democrats and then 10 Democrats 2 nights in a row. It's unclear who's going to be on the outside looking in. As of the moment, our own Seth Moulton is on the outside. Elizabeth Warren's on the inside. A split that I think we'll hear about manifested itself starting with Joe Biden's speech yesterday in New Hampshire at a town hall, where he says that as I mentioned a minute ago, Republicans are not our enemy. They're just the opposition. This is a guy who's basically saying to America, it seems to me, you may hate those Republicans. You may hate Mitch McConnell from Merrick Garland and everything else. But what I'm betting you hate more is dysfunction and no outcomes. I'm going to work with these people. And, of course, they're the Sanders and the Warrens, who are far less charitable about Republicans. What sells?
I think that split is 1 versus 23 because Biden's running believes he's running a general election campaign. The other 23 are trying to win Democratic.
Well, that's my follow-up question. There are a lot. Everybody starts in the extremes in the primaries and then runs to the middle. Not everybody, virtually everybody runs to the middle in a final. How much does this kind of approach inhibit Biden, even though as of the moment he's a big-time front runner in a primary?
It might. I mean, you could answer this probably better. I think it depends on how many people are really in the primary. In other words, if Biden's the only person truly standing in the center on this, and then Sanders, Warren, to a certain extent, Buttigieg, Harris, if they have to split the others, even if that other group is larger, remember, you in theory can win Iowa with like 2.5% of the vote. Won't break out that way, but it's all you really need.
So what do you think about the impact of this?
I think that he's making a very smart decision. I think that, look, we always have to remember America is not Boston. We should have to have a passport to go to America from here. It's not San Francisco. It's not New York. I think what he's offering is going to play well nationally.
Even in a primary, do you think it's going to play well?
Because I think that in a lot of
people are sick of the
I think people just want it to work. They're tired of this, and I think that nationally, even in the Democratic Party, certainly those voters are not as liberal as Democratic primary voters.
Okay, very quick prediction. We didn't shut down the border like he said we would. Is he going to actually follow through on his tariff proposal?
I think he will. He has on almost all the other ones.
How about you?
I think it depends on if Bette Midler, annoys him. It's hard
She's
to
a has-been, isn't she? A psycho, too.
Yeah.
Good to see you, Dan. Thanks so much, Charlie.
Thanks,
you
Jim.
as well. Appreciate it.